this show on the road. I've got another short day ahead of you guys. Well, at least for this class. So hopefully we can keep up with that trend. Per the usual, I've got a PowerPoint for you, but I'm going to ask you a poll question and please respond to it because I am very curious about what y'all think. Because unfortunately, there are only 5 of us right now. Um, Hopefully more people join in, otherwise I'm not going to be inputting a whole lot of extra credit later, which would be kind of unfortunate. Ooh, so you guys disagreed with the last class. You said no. I'm personally on the fence. As much as I would love for spring to have sprung already, feel like I feel like Kansas just doesn't it's not that nice to us. So yeah. I I probably would have said no, but call me cynical. So we're diving into week 6. I guess I haven't counted how many weeks are in this semester, but we're getting close to being halfway through. We're trudging on through there and can't complain. I'd love to be out of Zoom University. So today's PowerPoint is brought to you by the color green, and I was really amused with myself as I was creating this PowerPoint because like stock images kept showing up as suggestions for background designs on the slides. So I just said to heck with it and started including all the random stock pictures. So enjoy those. Love a little bit of randomness on a Monday morning. The agenda looks kind of like it always has. A couple of announcements, lecture, the week's extra credit. We will go over an important note that will be pertinent to this paper and to the next one. So it's kind of the only new thing on the agenda. But other than that, it's still the same. In terms of announcements, the papers are coming along very well. I will definitely have them done by my Sunday deadline. I really want to have them done earlier, but I'm not going to throw out a day because we all know how the universe can be when you like make plans and say that you're going to do something. It just picks up a wrench and decides to throw it in there. So I'm not going to taboo myself, but they will be done by my deadline. And that's kind of it. There's not a whole lot new going on. We're 2 weeks out from the next paper, 2.5 weeks, I guess, technically. Keep that in the back of your mind, but we are trudging along. So I want to spend some of this brief class going over some of the ideas that we talked about, well, didn't really talk about, that we read about last week and had some assignments over. Because last week's class, I just kind of introduced the paper more than actually talking about the content of the textbook. So that being said, the assignments that you did were designed to reorient your thinking for responding to the article that we are reading instead of just analyzing it. And we went over response strategies, handling the opposing viewpoint, entering the larger conversation, and multi-sided argument strategies. This one's a personal fave stock image of mine. Yeah, so cute. Anyway, the response strategies that we discussed. The yes and response strategy is the one that made the appearance on the quiz. And a lot of people got this one wrong. And I'm wanting to discuss it a bit now because I think that many of you are going to use a yes and response strategy because this is the one that we'll use when we agree with the original argument that the article is making. And as I said in the question on the quiz, as it was discussing your textbook a bit, it's not enough to just agree with the argument that was made by the original article. We have to agree and find a way to add our own voice, our own opinion into the conversation, which is where the and comes in. So you can make suggestions, you can offer a solution, you can do a wide variety of things, but you need to make your argument yours and original somehow, so that someone would want to read your argument instead of just going to the original argument that you're responding to. So, like I said, I think many of you will use that one, but feel free to prove me wrong. So, if you decide that you disagree with the article's argument, the best thing to do for the paper would be to identify weaknesses in the arguments, claims, warrants, assumptions, and offer alternatives to those. Say that something is incorrect, offer an alternative. Say that something doesn't encompass the whole issue, offer an alternative. I hope you're seeing a trend there. And then when you're on the fence about the issue, you can consider what the argument does well, but then acknowledge places where changes and improvements should be made. I know that for those of you who read the David Doss article, we're not really a big fan of the fish analogy, are we? So that's an example of how you can qualify an argument. So handling the opposing viewpoint, I think out of all of the things that I'm going to talk at you about for this PowerPoint, this is the more important point that I'm going to make. So if you pay attention to any part of the PowerPoint, please pay attention to this part, because addressing the opposing viewpoint is the crux of the multi-sided argument that we're creating for the second paper. If you don't handle the opposing viewpoint well in your presentation draft of the paper, that's going to be reflected in your grade. So if there are any questions, let me know. But that being said, the opposing viewpoint is going to be present in everybody's papers, whether you agree with the article, disagree with it, or qualify it. You're going to have to come up with some reasonable opposing viewpoint and discuss it in some depth. As I said, it's key to the multi-sided argument. It's how we build our authorial ethos to this neutral audience. We're demonstrating to them that we've done our research, that we know about both sides of the issue, and that we're confident that our opinion is the correct one. So there are a couple of ways that you can go about including the opposing viewpoint in your paper. You can summarize the ideas that it would have, the beliefs, the assumptions, the whatever the opposing viewpoint may look like for the article that you choose for the argument that you're writing about. And then you can take a more direct approach to that by including quotations from sources that would be members of the opposing viewpoint. I talked last week about how we will be including secondary sources for this paper. A minimum of 2, can be more, and one of those sources could be one that discusses or is from the perspective of the opposing viewpoint. That's totally acceptable. And then the key with the opposing viewpoint is that we address it in our paper, but we find a way to bring the attention back to the claim that we're making about the argument. Yeah, thanks McDonald's for ruining my train of thought. So this one's not a stock image, but you know that I had to find another opportunity to include a pic of our favorite old white rhetorics dude. But we were talking last week about entering the larger conversation, and Kenneth Burke's parlor example is a really good way to think about this. That's why I talked about it. That's why your textbook talks about it. And this goes hand in hand with that multi-sided argument that I was talking about, that you are entering the conversation, you've listened to both people speak, both sides of the conversations make their argument, and then you enter and offer your own opinion. So, yeah, being really lost my train of thought. That little McDonald's jingle just totally ruined my flow. When we enter the larger conversation and appeal to this neutral audience, appearing like we are knowledgeable about both sides of the issue, that we have weighed all of the facts, data, statistics, whatever it may be, and still have our opinion, is a strong way to appeal to this audience. That's what I was trying to get at. So we discussed multi-sided argument strategies. Those are summarizing, rebutting, and conceding. In my opinion, summarizing is less strong of a strategy than rebutting and conceding. Your neutral audience appreciates seeing specific claims, quotations, paraphrases from specific sources. So the summarizing strategy is just kind of making statements about what the opposing viewpoint might think. And then rebutting and conceding is where you bring specific points, whether they're from secondary sources, whether they're from the article itself, and rebutting and conceding them. So when we rebut a claim, we identify, a specific area of that claim that we disagree with, and we discuss how it's wrong. We discuss how maybe it doesn't cover the issue efficiently. Maybe it is neglecting key information. Maybe it's just not as good as what we think. And that's all part of the rebuttal. And then the concession is a little bit different. It's a lot a bit different than the rebuttal. It's almost the opposite. When we concede a point, we're acknowledging where the opposing viewpoint, maybe it's the original article, maybe it is an opposing viewpoint that we identified ourselves. But either way, we're acknowledging where it makes a good claim and conceding that. But then we find a way to bring the conversation back to our own opinion. So the way that happens can look like the rebuttal, that, while this point is good, it doesn't fully encompass the issue. But instead of just saying that the claim is false or bad or whatever, you're acknowledging that it has some goodness to it. So the next couple of slides are going to touch on this week's assignments. The reading for this week is really light, guys. Like, your quiz only has 3 questions on it. So there's not a whole lot to talk about here, but we will go through it and get this PowerPoint done. So your assignment for tonight is the believing and doubting game. This game is designed to help you critically approach your multi-sided argument. So it's going to ask you to come up with a position about the article that you're discussing, and also to come up with a position for someone who might be a member of the opposing viewpoint audience. So this game asks you to, in a sense, like, adopt 2 perspectives. The one hand is the one that you are going to argue in your paper, and on the other hand, you have the one that you are going to address as the opposing viewpoint. This isn't something that's super innate to us. It's a lot of critical thinking. So this assignment, I think, is one of the more important ones of the module, because this helps us have a good understanding of the opposing viewpoint, which is critical to the multi-sided argument. But it can also cause students some difficulty because, like I said, imagining yourself as disagreeing with yourself is not super easy. It's not something we do very often. So if you have a question about this assignment, please let me know. But I told my last class, and I'll tell you, if you give this assignment your 100% effort, thinking about your opposing viewpoint in the final draft of the paper is going to be that much easier. So do yourself a favor. And then the other assignment for the week is developing the logos of your own argument. This should look a little familiar. So this assignment is going to ask you to create a more thesis working claim like statement from what you talk about in your believing and doubting game. And for this activity, the claim must respond in some way directly to the original article. So you either agree with it, disagree with it, or qualify it. Hint, hint, wink, wink. And then you're going to start discussing the ways that you're going to push the conversation forward in your own way, offer the reasons that you have for believing what you do, and addressing the opposing viewpoint. So this is going to kind of be the skeleton of your paper. Yeah. Which brings us into this week's extra credit. Woohoo! So, in the chat, I would like you to start to brainstorm your position on the article and what the opposing viewpoint might be. So, what I want to see in the chat is your stance and then someone else's stance, the opposing viewpoint stance. These responses don't need to be like super well thought out. You know, I acknowledge that it's already 10:45. It's almost 11 in the morning. That had a little bit more like weight in my last class when it wasn't even 10 a.m. yet. So I know that your ideas aren't going to be like the most polished, and that's fine. We're just brainstorming. So underneath the requirements for the extra credit, I gave you a couple of prompts to get the gears turning on positions that you could take for the 4 articles that were available. So I'll give you a couple of moments in the chat. Let me know. So I suppose one thing that I didn't state explicitly when we were talking about the opposing viewpoint, I mentioned it on the slide itself, but I don't think I said it, is that we need to address the opposing viewpoint with good faith and due diligence. We don't want to assume that the opposing viewpoint disagrees with the article's claim, disagrees with us out of spite or just for disagreement's sake. You know, or that like they hate America, they hate poor people. Those aren't the kinds of opposing viewpoints reasonings that we're entertaining for this paper. So as you think about what the opposing viewpoint might consider for your argument, think about what kind of good faith beliefs, values these people might have that might cause them to disagree with you. Right. Keep those coming in, but I will move on to the note that I was wanting to make earlier. So I don't think we discussed this explicitly in this class last week, but I did note that for the response paper, I absolutely highly encourage you to write it over the same article that you wrote the rhetorical analysis over. This is the absolute easiest thing to do. If you want to make your life as easy as possible in this class, do this. You don't have to write about the same article if you don't want to. But the caveat to that is that I must approve of the article. Absolutely non-negotiable. And if you would like to use a new or different article, they need to be submitted to me for approval by Wednesday. So a couple of things that I would be looking for in a potential article would be that they are from a relatively reliable source, that they are argumentative, that they're relatively recent. But yeah, keep in mind that I can tell you that an article is not sufficient for this assignment. And any paper that responds to an article that I did not approve of will receive a failing grade. The reasoning behind that is, how can I grade something that I don't know what it's about? So, kind of recap, if you want an easy module, use the same article. If you would really like to use a new article, must be sent to me by Wednesday. After Wednesday, I'm not taking new suggestions. I was going to say, I had an idea of something I was going to say. I won't accept articles that talk about marijuana, gun control, or student athletes being paid. I've seen them way too many times. And the argumentation on those issues is not. We're only writing 4 pages. We're not going to convince people to legalize marijuana in 4 pages. Same with gun control, same with student athletes being paid. It's kind of my reasoning behind that. I also see it too many times. So, all of that aside, here are what your assignments look like this week. If my cat would stop trying to get into things, that would be great. Like I said, relatively easy if you get the reading done early. The believing and doubting game, if it gives you issue, please let me know. And then we kind of ride into the weekend. So you're welcome for that. That one was a little unintentional, but I'll take the credit for it. Questions, comments, revelations, concerns, issues, anything. Can either unmute yourself and ask, put it in the chat, or even just send me an email after class. Doesn't matter to me.
In the homework assigned tonight, what does it mean when it says, like, include 2 visual ways of showing how you're feeling sympathetic?
Those visual ways.
Yeah.
You know, don't have a good answer for that.
Okay, so
I'm sorry, I don't have a good answer for that. I guess that's what I get for copy and pasting the instructions. So, yeah, I guess I will take that part out because I'm not sure what it means, and I don't really want to confuse anybody. So we'll just stick with like 2 paragraphs. They can be kind of rough paragraphs. They don't need to be paper length paragraphs, but just some writing to get your ideas out.
okay.
So, thanks, Emily. I will make that change. Anyone else? Are there any other instructions that have weird little things in them that I need to change? Hit me, guys. I will take the crickets as a no. So with that, have a great week. Send me an email if the believing and doubting game is giving you some trouble. I told many of you in our one-on-ones that I don't really leave my computer very often. So please send me an email. I will get back to you on that. So with that, goodbye.